The creek ran low that April morning, sliding over pale limestone like a thin ribbon of silver under the Texas sun. Elias Gray had come there for quiet. He always came there for quiet. After the war, silence had become the only thing that did not accuse him, did not scream in his ears, did not carry the smell of smoke and blood. He knelt at the water's edge, filling his canteen, when he heard it. It was not the cry of a hawk or the rustle of live oak leaves in the breeze. It was human, broken, a sound like someone trying not to scream. Elias froze. The hill country stretched wide and empty around him, cedar trees scattered across rolling limestone hills, wild grass bending under soft wind. No ranch stood close. No wagon road ran near. There should not have been anyone there. Then he heard it again, and he rose slowly and followed the sound downstream, boots crunching over gravel. 20 yards ahead, beneath a fallen cottonwood tree, he saw her. She was crumpled against the trunk like something discarded. Her calico dress was torn and muddy, one sleeve soaked dark with fresh blood. Auburn hair spilled around her shoulders, catching the morning light like copper wire. She could not have been more than 19. Her eyes snapped open when his shadow fell across her. Blue, cold, wild. She tried to scramble backward, but the log stopped her. One hand pressed against her wounded shoulder. The other clutched the hem of her skirt like it was armor. "Stay back," she whispered. Her voice scraped like dry leaves. "Just stay back." Elias lifted his hand slowly, palms open. He had seen that look before. Soldiers cornered in foxholes. Men who thought every shadow carried death. "I'm not fixing to hurt you," he said, his voice low and steady. "You're bleeding bad. Let me take a look." She laughed then, sharp and bitter. "Hurt me?" Her eyes drifted past him, seeing something that was not there. "If you've got any kindness in you at all, just kill me fast." The words struck him harder than any rifle butt ever had. "I ain't killing nobody," Elias said. "You will," she breathed. "Soon as you see." He stepped closer, slow as approaching a spooked horse. He could see the bullet furrow across her shoulder now. It had grazed her deep enough to bleed, but not deep enough to kill. Luck, if you could call it that. "I need to clean that," he said. "I've got bandages in my saddlebags." "No." Her fingers tightened around her skirt. "You touch me. You'll see what they did. And then you'll want to finish it." Something in her tone told him this was not madness. It was certainty. "Try me," he said quietly. The wind moved through the cedar trees. A red-tailed hawk circled overhead. The creek murmured against stone. Minutes passed before she spoke again. "My name's Maeve. Maeve Tucker." "Elias Gray." "Don't be pleased to know me," she said. He crouched in front of her. "Let me see that shoulder, Maeve." Slowly, like it cost her something deep inside, she let her hand fall away. He cleaned the wound with water from the creek. She flinched, but she did not pull back. Up close, he saw other marks. Old bruises fading yellow. A split lip healed crooked. Scars along her arms that did not come from farm work. When the torn fabric shifted as he worked, the hem of her skirt slid higher. That was when he saw it. On the pale skin of her inner thigh, burned deep and deliberate, was a word. Property. The brand was not a wild scar from some accident. It was straight, clean, pressed in with purpose, the kind of mark you put on cattle. Elias's hands went still. Maeve saw where he was looking. Her face drained of color. She yanked her skirt down and covered herself like she could hide it again. "Now you know," she whispered. "Now you see what I am." Elias sat back on his heels. The war had shown him cruelty. He had seen men blown apart. He had seen boys cry for their mothers in mud soaked with blood, but this felt worse. "I see what they did to you," he said. "That ain't what you are." Tears slipped down her cheeks without sound. "They had a place," she said through shaking breath. "Called it a stockyard, not for cattle. Women who couldn't pay debts, women whose men died, women nobody would miss. They marked us, fed us like animals, sold us like horses." Elias felt something old and violent rise in his chest. "How'd you get out?" he asked. "Fire," she said. "Place burned 2 weeks back. I ran. Been running ever since." He stood and offered his hand. "You can stop running now." She stared at his hand like it might bite her. "Men like that don't stop," she said. "They don't lose property." "Let them look," he replied. "They'll find me." For a long moment, she did not move. Then she placed her hand in his. Her grip was cold, but strong. He helped her onto his bay mare and mounted behind her. She held herself stiff at first, every muscle tight. But as they rode through deer trails and cedar shadows toward his hidden cabin in the hills, and he felt some of that tension ease. The cabin sat low in a clearing ringed by oak and limestone. Smoke curled from the chimney. It was small, solid, safe. Inside, it was clean and spare. A stone fireplace, a rough table, a single bed in the corner. "You can take the bed," he said. "I'll sleep by the fire." She looked at him like she did not understand the language he was speaking. "Why?" she asked. "What do you want?" He thought about the empty nights, the silence, the way the war had hollowed him out. "Maybe I'm tired of being alone," he said. "Maybe you are too." As she sat carefully in his chair, her hand smoothing down her skirt to hide the brand that no cloth could truly hide, Elias understood something clear and dangerous. Nothing about this was going to be simple. And somewhere out there, at the men who had burned that word into her skin, were already looking. And when they came, he would be the one standing in their way. The first 3 days in the cabin passed like two wounded animals circling each other, careful not to startle, careful not to trust too quickly. Elias kept to his routines. He checked snares in the hills, chopped wood, mended leather by the fire. Maeve stayed near the window, watching the trees like danger might step out of them at any moment. Her shoulder healed clean, the angry red fading to pink. But the deeper wounds did not close so easy. At night, she sometimes cried out in her sleep, a small sound like a child lost in fog. Elias would wake at once, sitting up by the fire, listening to her breathing steady again. He never touched her without warning, never stepped too close without speaking first. On the 4th morning, he found her standing before the cracked mirror near the wash basin. She studied her reflection like it belonged to someone else. "They cut it," she said softly, touching the ragged ends of her hair. "First thing they did. Said long hair was vanity." "It'll grow back," Elias replied. She turned to him. "You got scissors?" He fetched the small pair from his shaving kit. She sat in the chair by the fire, back straight. He worked slow and careful, trimming until her auburn hair fell even around her face. When she stood again and faced the mirror, something had changed. She still carried fear in her eyes, but beneath it lived something else. Defiance. "You look like yourself," he said. She gave the smallest smile. "I ain't sure who that is anymore." That evening, rain drummed against the roof, and they cooked together in quiet rhythm. She chopped vegetables while he fried salt pork. When they sat to eat, she surprised him. "You got family?" she asked. "Had a brother," Elias said. Lost him at Fredericksburg. Ma and Pa gone too. She nodded. Mine had a small farm near Austin. Yankees came through. Took everything. Pa tried to stop them. They shot him. Ma signed something before she died. Said it would pay the doctor. Next thing I knew, I belonged to a man named Jonah Bexley. The name settled heavy in the cabin. He ran the place? Elias asked. She nodded once. Called it lawful debt. Said we owed him work. Said we signed papers. We never saw no papers. Just irons. She did not look at him when she said it. The rain fell harder. The next morning she stood at the door, breathing in clean air like it might wash something out of her lungs. Maybe we should go to Bandera, she said suddenly. I can't hide forever. Elias studied her face. Fear still lingered, but courage stood beside it now. Bandera's small, he said. We'll keep it quick. She braided her hair neat, wore one of his spare shirts belted at the waist, and an old pair of trousers. With her hat pulled low, she looked like a ranch hand. They rode into town late morning. Bandera sat quiet between limestone hills, a handful of buildings along a dirt street. The general store, the saloon, the blacksmith shop. Maeve's grip tightened around Elias's waist as they dismounted. Inside the store, Mrs. Henderson greeted them with careful eyes. Elias bought iodine, bandages, flour. Maeve stepped forward and touched a bolt of sky-blue cotton with tiny white flowers. That one, she said softly. It was the first time she chose something for herself. They were loading supplies when a voice cut across the street. Well, I'll be damned. A tall man staggered from the saloon, jaw still bruised from some past fight. He squinted at Maeve. Thought I recognized that hair, he said. Lift that skirt, sweetheart. Let's see if you're worth a reward. Maeve froze. The word reward drifted through the air like smoke. Elias stepped in front of her. You're drunk, he said. Maybe, the man grinned, but I heard about a runaway marked like cattle. Jonah Bexley offering good money. The street grew quiet. Faces appeared in doorways. Men smelled profit. Go on, the drunk pressed. Show us what's branded on that leg. The word branded hit Maeve like a blow. Elias felt her shaking behind him. That's enough, Elias said. The drunk laughed and took a step closer. Elias's fist dropped him in the dirt. For a second, silence. Then murmurs. Maybe he's right, someone said. If she's property, returning her's the law. The sheriff's dead, another voice added. Law's still law, said a rancher named Samuel Cross, stepping forward. Elias mounted fast, pulling Maeve up behind him. She belongs to herself, he called. As they rode out, the drunk shouted after them. Jonah Bexley's got men everywhere. You can't hide stolen goods forever. That night in the cabin, Elias told her what he knew. I'm riding back tomorrow, he said. Need to see this Bexley. You can't, she whispered. I need to know what's coming. He returned to Bandera alone the next day. Inside the saloon stood a man too polished for the hills. Silver hair, expensive boots, a sheriff's badge pinned to his vest like decoration. Jonah Bexley. His voice was smooth as polished wood. The young woman in question, Bexley was saying, is legally bound by debt. Her mother signed proper contracts. She is my property until her obligation is satisfied. Elias stepped forward. People ain't property. Bexley's smile did not reach his eyes. You have 24 hours, he said quietly to Elias. Return what you've stolen, or I will collect. Elias rode home hard. He found Maeve waiting in the doorway. He's coming, Elias said. They spent the night preparing, cleaning guns, counting ammunition, tearing the blue cotton into bandages. Yet near midnight, they heard horses. 3 riders moved through the dark like wolves. Elias blew out the lamp. "Back room," he whispered to Maeve. "Bar the door." Boots pounded. A window shattered. Flames licked the curtains. Gunfire exploded inside the cabin. Elias fired through the door. A man fell. Shotgun blasts tore splinters from the walls. Smoke filled the air. A bullet slammed into Elias's side. He staggered but stayed upright. "Where's the girl?" a voice shouted. The bedroom door opened. Maeve stepped out, pistol in hand. "Leave him alone," she said. One of the men raised his gun toward Elias's head. The shot that rang out came from Maeve. The man dropped. Chaos followed. Elias grabbed a fallen pistol and fired again. Another attacker fell. The last man fled into the night. Smoke hung thick in the cabin. Maeve rushed to Elias as he slid down the wall, blood soaking his shirt. "They'll come back," she whispered. "I know," he said, forcing breath through pain. And somewhere out there, Jonah Bakesley was already saddling more horses. 3 days later, the hills no longer felt like shelter. Elias lay pale against the cabin wall, his wounds bound tight, but still bleeding through. The man who escaped had carried word. That much was certain. Maeve moved through the cabin with steady hands, but inside her chest, her heart beat like a drum before battle. Before dawn on the 4th morning, she heard it. Horses. Not 3 this time. Many. Torchlight flickered through the cedar trees, small flames moving between trunks like hunting spirits. Elias struggled to sit up, pain carving lines deep into his face. "He's here," he said. Jonah Bakesley stepped into the clearing just as the first light of morning touched the limestone hills. He looked immaculate despite the ride. Coat clean. Boots polished. The silver badge pinned to his chest gleamed. Behind him stood 6 armed men. "Well," Bakesley called calmly, "this has gone on long enough." Maeve stepped in front of Elias before she even realized she was moving. "I told you," Bakesley continued, "return voluntarily and we avoid unpleasantness." "I ain't going back," Maeve said. Bakesley sighed like she had disappointed him. "My dear, you never left. Legally speaking, you remain my property until your debt is satisfied." "You forged those papers," Elias rasped. Bakesley's eyes flicked to him with cold amusement. "Your mother signed," he said to Maeve. "Medical bills, funeral costs. I offered her mercy." "She offered your service." The words hit like a hammer. Maeve swayed but did not fall. "You're lying." "I have the documents," he replied smoothly. "You owe approximately $3,000. At standard rates, that is 15 years of service." 15 years. Her stomach turned. "Reduce it to 10, Bakesley added. "If you surrender now." One of his men pressed a rifle to Elias's temple. "You refuse," Bakesley said softly, "and your friend dies." The forest went quiet. Even the birds held their breath. Maeve looked at Elias. Blood soaked through his bandages again. He was fading. She saw it. "I'll come," she said. "No," Elias breathed. "I'll come," she repeated louder. "But I want to say goodbye." Bakesley nodded graciously. Maeve knelt beside Elias. To anyone watching, it looked tender. But when she leaned close, she whispered, "Trust me." Then she stood. Her hand moved to the pistol at her belt. "You want your property?" she said. "Come take it." She fired. The bullet struck Bakesley high in the chest. He stumbled backward, shock spreading across his face like a crack in glass. For one heartbeat, His men froze. That heartbeat was enough. Elias rolled behind a limestone outcrop and fired despite the pain tearing through him. One gunman fell. Maeve dove for cover behind an oak tree, firing again. Gunfire shattered the quiet dawn. Bark splintered. Birds exploded into the sky. Beixley dropped to his knees, blood soaking into wildflowers. "Take her alive," he shouted weakly. But his authority was bleeding out with him. One of the gunmen advanced. Maeve steadied her aim and shot him down. Another rushed left and caught a bullet from Elias. Then came a new sound. More horses, hard and fast. The gunman hesitated. Through the trees rode Samuel Cross and half a dozen ranchers from Bandera, rifles raised. "That's enough," Cross shouted. Shots cracked from the tree line. 2 of Beixley's remaining men fell instantly. The rest threw down their weapons. Samuel Cross dismounted and strode forward. "Word came from Austin," he said coldly to Beixley. "You're wanted for trafficking and fraud. You ain't no sheriff." Beixley tried to speak, blood bubbling at his lips. Cross pulled folded papers from Beixley's coat and glanced over them. "Forgeries," he said. "Girls free." The word free landed on Maeve like sunlight after winter. Free. Not runaway. Not property. Not marked stock. Free. Beixley collapsed into the grass, his empire ending among spring flowers. Cross's men rushed to Elias. A young ranch hand with medical training worked fast to stop the bleeding. "He'll live," the young man said. "If we move." They carried Elias back to Bandera on a stretcher made of blankets and branches. The town gathered in silence as they passed. 6 weeks later, bluebonnets covered the hills like pieces of sky fallen to earth. Elias stood in the doorway of their rebuilt cabin, his shoulders stiff but strong again. Sunlight warmed the porch. Smoke curled lazy from the chimney. Maeve knelt in the garden, dirt on her hands, wearing a blue dress she had sewn from that bolt of cotton. The brand still marked her thigh, but it no longer owned her. Elias walked down into the garden and pulled something from his pocket. A ring hammered from the brass of his last war bullet. "I figured," he said, yet dropping to one knee in the dirt. "If I was going to keep it, I ought to turn it into something that builds instead of kills." Tears filled her eyes. "Yes," she whispered before he could finish. "Yes." He slid the rough ring onto her finger. It was not perfect. Neither were they. They married in the small white church near the Guadalupe River. The town came. Mrs. Henderson brought flowers. Samuel Cross stood witness. When Reverend Hayes pronounced them husband and wife, the church erupted in applause. For the first time since iron had burned into her skin, Maeve Tucker felt celebrated instead of hidden. That night, under a sky thick with Texas stars, they rode home together. At the cabin door, Elias carried her inside despite her laughing protests. "What do we do now?" she asked softly. He pulled her close. "We live," he said. "We live free, and we never let anyone turn us into something we ain't." Outside, the hill country settled into quiet. The war was over. The running was over. And in a small cabin beneath the Texas stars, 2 people who had been marked by violence began something no brand could ever claim. A life chosen. A life free.